everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And we are really excited to have one of our favorite guests back on with us again, Guy Stephen Needler. And Guy's been on the show several times. I'll put some links to his past episodes, but you check out just about any series over the last couple of years, and we've had Guy on there to get his perspective. Guy's written, I think this is up to your 13th published book, I think you had just mentioned, and more on the go. And books such as The History of God, Beyond the Source, Psycho-Spiritual Healing, The Om, I think we talked about that one last. Some really amazing work. And Guy's work helps us circumvent our current reality and shine a light on what can be possible. And if you haven't checked out our episodes before or dived into Guy's work, Guy has this really incredible ability to tap into the greater reality. And personally, I find that a lot of times that ability helps to provide some much needed perspective when you feel like you're kind of in the middle of things. It gives you this really much broader perspective to navigate our current world. And so we love hearing what Guy has to say about just about anything. So anytime we have a new series, we ask Guy to join us and share his perspective. So Guy, welcome back to the show, and thanks so much.
Well, thank you both. And I'm really interested in the title of this particular series, which is in effect it's about minimalism, which feeds in really nicely with the avoiding karma sort of genre of thought process.
Well, we asked you with this series what you would like to speak about, and you just wrote back how to live in an uncluttered and unmaterialistic way. And I thought that's really perfect for this concept of living freely, because I also think living freely in a world that really feels the opposite of that, that's actually feeling almost at the pinnacle of being cluttered and materialistic. So how do we start to bring those concepts back into this world that in many ways doesn't really run that way? So I'm going to pass it back to you, Guy, and maybe you can break that down a little bit as far as what do you mean by living in an uncluttered and unmaterialistic way, and how do we even begin that process?
Well, we started out in a materialistic way, and we finish in an unmaterialistic way, because we come in with nothing, and we leave being able to take nothing with us when we leave this incarnation. And really, it's about everything that is in the material world is, in effect, a distraction to us, irrespective of its, the clothes we wear, the jewelry we wear, the vehicles we travel around in, the property we live in, for example. Our thought process is about, status, roles that we play, the effect we have on others, where we work. These are all things that create a level of attachment to the gross physical environments that we call the physical, as part of the physical universe. And so if we can live in an uncluttered way, this means that we are more capable of being able to have time to tune into ourselves and give ourselves time to meditate and connect with the greater reality, and therefore be part of the greater reality or associate ourselves with the greater reality, rather than associate ourselves with what is our immediate environment, which is the physical body and the abodes that we live in, and the locational buildings that we work in. And maybe we have some pastimes, we go to different clubs or different sports we do. And if you think about it from this perspective, you think, well, all of these different things create, say, a distraction from our ability to connect. And all these different things create a level of responsibility. And it's interesting that if we have a responsibility, then it takes our time up, and it also makes us, again, distracted from what we are really need to do, which is to become connected. And so we start to then compare ourselves with other people. So when we start to compare ourselves with other people, we start to get dissatisfied with what we've got. And if it comes right down to, from a really sort of strategic perspective, look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I studied a long time ago in an MBA, and it's still part of the MBA sort of process. It's really about what are your basic needs in existence. The first one is finding food. The second one is finding shelter, and then you find warmth, and then there's other parts to it as well. There's different ways of keeping yourself warm. There's improving your shelter, there's improving your food source, there's improving the clothing you have, and you start to get extra bits and pieces and become more and more comfortable, so to speak. But all these things generates a dissatisfaction with where you are. And so when we have dissatisfaction, that's a really low frequency ego-based thoughts, because we start to compare ourselves significantly with others. And if someone's bought a new car, for example, you think, why has he got a new car, or why has she got a new car? No, I haven't. What do they do to get that? Are they selling drugs, or are they earning significantly more than they're owning up to? Do they have a job, or they do something else, or is their family wealthy? So we start to do all these different sort of mental acrobatics, which again starts to confuse us in our simplicity of our thought process. And so being in a materialistic thought process also reflects in our materialistic environment. And being in an uncluttered thought process also results in an uncluttered environment as well. So if we can start to think very simply, whilst also being very mature and very educated and very capable individuals, then we start to realize that all we need to do is strip everything back to the basics of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And once we have that, we actually don't need anything else, because everything else is just something that needs to be maintained, looked after, updated, sold, changed, found when it's been hidden, and all these different things, which again causes further confusion.
Guy, what about, I think right at the moment, when we talk about even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it seems like, especially right at the moment, a lot of people are, outside of the additional clutter, a lot of people are really struggling with basic needs. A lot of people are, we were just talking to Bruce Lipton, and he was saying, about 50% of Americans, he said, would have a hard time finding $400, have access to that if you ask them right now if they could get their hands on it. So sort of like when people are struggling with even how are they gonna pay their rent? How are they going to
feed their family?
How are they going to feed their families? Like, because those are intense fears that start to come up for people, and a lot of people are kind of struggling in that area. How do you work with uncluttering those thoughts, or getting unattached to some of the materialistic thoughts around that, when you are sort of in that fight or flight survival aspect?
Well, first question is, are they really in that situation? Because when you see people saying, I haven't got, I struggle to pay £100 for my gas bill, for example, and then you find out they're buying e-cigarettes, or they're going to McDonald's for their meals, and they're going to other locations. You think, well, hang about, you're overpaying for what you need. And rather than going right back to basics, for instance, buying your fruit and veg, maybe your meat in the traditional locations, such as a fruitier, a grocer, or a butcher, and cooking it yourself, they go into these fast food places where the food is not so nutritious, although the advertisements would say otherwise, of course, and of course it's more expensive. So the amount of money they're spending on what they think is their basic requirements is actually significantly more than what they should spend, should they use an intelligent way of understanding what they're buying. And so when we start to see people saying, I'm struggling to pay for this or pay for that, but they're still working, or they're on benefits, they're either not using the benefits right, or they're not using the money right that they've got, not spending it on the right things. They're focusing on other things, like, I'm going to get sued here, like Netflix, like Disney Plus, like Amazon Prime. They're all over the internet, and they've got all of these, packages, sports packages on the television provider that's taking 50, 60, 70 pounds a month out of their bank accounts that they don't need to have taken out of their bank accounts. It's just that they're spending money on things that they actually don't need. And we don't have Netflix, we don't have Disney Plus, we don't have Amazon Prime. We just use what's there, what's free. We don't have Wi-Fi. Everything we're doing now is on data. We have a very cheap data plan, but as it happens, it's unlimited as it happens. but it's extremely cheap compared to what you would normally get because we've negotiated this. So you start to see that in reality, people claim poverty, but they're not in poverty. It's just that their money management is not good because they're distracted by wanting other things. You know, the children want to have Nike trainers, or some of the things like Gucci sunglasses, for example. These sorts of things are a distraction from the absolute basic need of what we actually need. And so marketed product is affecting not only the children, but it's also significantly affecting the way in which the adults can respond to the children, work with the children. And so the whole thing starts to snowball. So the word poverty, I would take it with a pinch of salt, because it depends upon how you use what you've got in terms of how you can feed and educate and clothe and house yourself. Now, if individuals are struggling because they've lost their jobs, or because their partner has died, or moved out, they got divorced, etc., then they should seek help, and seek proper help to get the right levels of benefits, because the benefits are there. You know, the whole society is actually leaning towards a total benefit society if we're not careful, but they're there. But again, if you're on benefits, there should be a level of self pride or worth where maybe you start to do some form of charity work or something to offset the benefits you're getting, if you're getting the benefits but you can't work, for example. So the detachment from that which you've programmed to have, and go down to the basics. Yeah, if you go into a supermarket, it's Walmart where you are, but it's Asda where we are. So Walmart and Asda are the same brand. You can go in there and you can get a can of chopped tomatoes, and if you buy a premium brand can of chopped tomatoes, it might cost you 60 or 70 pence, 60 or 70 cents, or near there. If you buy the zero branded stuff, which is basically Walmart stuff or Asda stuff, it might cost you 13 or 14 pence. But there's this programming there that I must have the best. It's the same thing. It's just it's got a different wrapper around the can. So it's really about analyzing what you're doing and how you're being steered by those around you, by your peer group, and by society, as to whether you're actually using your income in an efficient way.
Guy, when you said dissatisfactory, when someone is deeply satisfied and kind of connecting more with the ego, is that linked to a lack of connection with source? Is that essentially what it's linked to? The deep dissatisfaction?
Dissatisfaction can come from two different sources. One, it's a deep knowingness that they're not connecting with source, they're not connecting with God, they're not giving themselves time to become more expansive, to understand who and what they are. But also, it's a pre-programmed thing that due to comparison, which is used by the ego to keep you down the frequencies, to stop you becoming more interested in spiritual things or metaphysical things, and therefore start to meditate and get higher frequencies and become more connected. So those are the two things which basically happen. And there's a lot of people who would say, well, I'm a successful person. I'm the chief executive officer of this business. I'm worth several £100 million or dollars, or what it is. But I feel dissatisfied. I feel frustrated. And that's because they're starting to realize that it doesn't matter what you've got. At the end of the day, it's your connection with who you are that makes the difference. It's understanding who and what you are makes a difference. And so the dissatisfaction side is usually a state of beingness that's being broadcast to you by your guardian helpers to make you sit up and take notice and realize that, money isn't your God. Your God is your God. And your God is able to be accessed through detaching from the physical, and therefore losing this connection with being materialistic. And being materialistic can result in significant levels of clutter, not only physical clutter, because we buy more things because we're able to buy more things because we desire them, but we don't actually need them, but also the maintenance of them, or where do I put this, or Do I actually need it now? Now I've got it, I must have it, even though I don't use it. So that's mental clutter as well.
Guy, I remember years back, gosh, this is probably about maybe 20 years ago. And I was going out to buy a suit. I needed to get a suit. And I hadn't had a suit before. And I didn't have a lot of money to pay for a suit. So I was kind of looking at more of a generic, kind of no-name type of suit and whatnot. I remember my friend was with me and she was saying, you need to also picture what you would want to be able to have, something that would be, so I think she was looking at like a Hugo Boss suit or something that was probably about 3 times as much as the one that I was doing. And so it kind of came into this concept of this sort of, law of attraction idea of like, if you keep asking for things that are less and less and less or smaller or not as good as what you would want to, that then you kind of become in resonance with that and you're never going to be open to something else. What are your thoughts around that? Because I feel like this has all been mixed into things and it gets confusing for people, because I know sometimes people would be like, okay, well, yeah, that would be fine to have just that and I'd be fine with that. But am I then kind of creating a limitation as far as what is possible for me to experience potentially?
Well, there's two ways of thinking that. One is that you could be limiting, but also the thing is that when we buy something, we have to consider something else. That's the quality of what we're buying. If we buy a suit and it's low quality and the seams start to become unstitched, for example, or the material's thin and it starts to wear out really quickly, then you might, in the period of 5 years, buy 5 suits costing more than the original high quality suits in the first place. And so one of the ways in which we need to think about things is, well, if we want to be efficient in our use of money or our use of our thought processes, is go for the one quality thing that's got the longevity. It's going to last a long time, and that you will not need to worry about and buy a replacement for later. Years ago, well, to some extent now, to be honest, but years ago in Europe, there was a certain model of Mercedes vehicle that was classified as being the world taxi, because it would last for over 1 million miles, and sometimes more than 2 million miles, 2.5 million miles, provided it was service right. So taxi drivers would buy these vehicles knowing that they're going to have to use them for the next 10 or 15 years because they cost so much money to buy. But they knew that within 5 years they'd have paid them off, and the rest of the time his money was coming in free because the vehicle they bought is high quality. It's not spending time in the garage because it hasn't broken down, and it's not creating a condition where they have to buy a new one every 2 or 3 years. And that goes the same for clothes. It goes the same for if you have to wear jewelry or watches, for example. Shoes, for example, good quality shoes. You might need to resole them, for example, reheel them every now and then. But a good quality pair of shoes, the uppers should last you for 10 or 15 years if you look after them. So again, it's to do with not just buying the cheapest, but buying something that's got the test of time associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I'll tell you something that's interesting on this. If you look at a lot of very religious nations, for example, Hindus, they buy things once that mean something to them, and it's usually gold. So it could be a gold watch, gold ring, gold necklace, those sorts of things, and that's it. That lasts them for the rest of their life, because they know that what they've got is quality, has got meaning to it, and so they don't need to clutter their minds in thinking, "Oh, I must get the next fashion in jewelry because this is going to last the test of time." If you look at things that we do buy, there are things which are timeless. They're not affected by fashions. They're not affected by updates or upgrades. So it's again this choosing correctly and buying once actually unclutters the mind, and also in its own right removes the materialistic tendency.
Mm-hmm.
Guy, where are we now? Because we spoke with you maybe about 9 months ago or so, perhaps, and I just wanted your insights on where we've moved to at this time space coordinate. Where are we? We just passed the solar eclipse. What that was about, and what your insights are about that. And I just wanted to see if you could share a little bit, shed a little bit more light on that.
Well, the solar eclipse is simply that. It's a movement of bodies. One blocks off the light of another one. That's it. It also blocks off the solar radiation from the sun to the earth. There's little bits of energy associated with the stellar bodies, and how the location of the Earth within the galaxy and the galaxy within the universe, and its rotation, going through locally high and locally low frequencies, affects the way which we sometimes think, behave and act. Because we're born in a high frequency, we think more spiritually. If you're born in a low frequency, we tend to think more materialistically. So things like the planetary movements, and the comments about Mercury's in retrograde today, so this is going to happen. I take with a extreme pinch of salt, because it's we can use these things as excuses for not doing something ourselves. I've been affected by this, or I've been affected by that. You're affected by what your thought process is, and how you respond to different interactions and circumstances that you're part of. So as a civilization, though, right now, we're going through an overlaying culture situation, and also that we can do anything we want to, which is not the way forward, because we should be responsible for what we do, whether it's right or wrong, and the potential learning process from that, and therefore evolutionary content that we can accrue from it. But on top of that, we need to be also responsible for the way in which we interact with each other as well. So if we start to think that, okay, our leaders say we can do this or do that, so we can do, and there's certain leaders in the world that are and have broke all the rules in the books, and so the population thinks they can do the same thing, that creates mayhem. So we're still heading down, although it's slowed down significantly. One of the lowest peaks points in our recent ascension of the frequencies that we've had for quite a long time. I like to use a sawtooth profile. We've got to explain how we move up the frequencies, how we become more spiritual, more understanding of the greater reality. And we go up in a gentle curve, or a gentle curve, or a straight line, which sometimes has its oscillations. But if you sort of zoom into those oscillations, you see little sawtooth profiles. We go up, we go down, we go up, we go down, with the average still going up. But in between these little sawtooth profiles, we've got big profiles, which, with little bits in between. And we've come down one of these big profiles, which is a long way. And we're about to bottom out. I thought we were going to bottom out 3 or 4 years ago, and we're still going down. So we actually started to curve, move this curve. And I fully believed and thought that the way we were turning around and helping each other and being part of a more collective society, when we had the COVID years, when we started to work with each other with different weather-based catastrophes, such as forest fires and brush fires and flooding and those sorts of things. And of course, now we've got how we're starting to work together to help the refugees from Ukraine and Gaza and Palestinian areas. We start to see that some of these things that we've allowed to happen shouldn't be allowed to happen. And the idea of working as a community to help people recover themselves was part of what was happening. But then for some reason we stopped doing it. We stopped helping each other as a community, going to the shops to help people to get food if they can't get out because they're susceptible to COVID. We stopped helping people rebuild their homes if they were flooded or if they've been burnt out by forest fires or bushfires. And we've even stopped helping people become placed in a second country if their primary country of residence has been bombed, for example, like what's happening between the Ukraine and Russia, and between Israel and and Palestine, and which is now happening with Iran as well. So we started to sort of we started to sort of break our descent and flatten out. We've gone down a bit. We've gone down a bit now, a little bit more. But I'm really feeling that people are starting to realise everywhere, even if they're the potential victors, that this isn't the right way to go. And you can start to see that there's demonstrations in some of these countries that are supposedly the aggressors, and from a military strategic perspective are winning. Actually, their population are saying, no, this isn't the right way to go. And so we are starting to bottom out, and we may not see it in our lifetime, probably about 50 years' time, but we'll start to remove ourselves from the need to have centralized government, because the centralized government isn't doing it. It's becoming, basically self-centered, selfish, and basically corrupt in all sorts of different ways. And if we can start to work in ourselves and self-govern ourselves and make sure everything works as it should do, from a well sort of advanced and maintained and mature society, then we'll start to come out the other side, and we'll start to cut the frequencies again and do the opposite of this big drop in the sawtooth profile to a huge move up to go. But that's going to be later. We're not going to get there yet. So probably we'll start to see. I'm starting to feel we start to see movement upwards properly. Maybe in 10 years' time, 5 to 10 years' time.
Well, we're setting it up maybe for our kids.
For the next generation.
Yeah. Guy,
children are really important, because it's the parents that program them. Okay, they get influence from other authority figures, such as their teachers, their best friends, and what they see on television, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the parents to teach the children morality, to teach them responsibility, to teach them to think before they act, to teach them the difference between what is right and wrong. And when they're taught properly, they are really good citizens. But if you get parents who are abstaining from their responsibilities, then they grow up just as bad as, or as worse than their parents in terms of their thoughts, behaviours, and actions. So, parents have really got a significantly important role. We blame it on the teachers, we blame it on society, but it's within the family unit that the opportunity to change the planet lies firmly, fairly, and squarely on.
Mm-hmm. Even when you were talking about responsibility, so much of that comes back to that. So when we were talking about even clutter and materialism, it's like, I think a practical thing that we can all do is really do an honest inventory of what are we spending our time, what is cluttering our life, what are all the different things, like you had talked about, Amazon Prime and Netflix and this and that, and why do we go and buy all these different things that maybe we don't need? Because I think when we do that, and then if we actually start to see it, it may uncover something else as to why we're filling our space up with all of those things. What do you usually find is underlying the necessity to clutter our lives so much with stuff that we don't really need?
In my experience, it usually comes down to a life that's come through with us where we've been in significant need. For instance, we've been born into an incarnation where we've lost our parents and we've had to fend for ourselves, for example, or we've been in a very poor family, and so we've had very, very little. So everything you can get is important. And so if we've been in a situation where that's the whole life, and it's been a very difficult life and not a very fruitful life as a result of it, maybe there's been an early death of the body, for example, through starvation, or maybe there's been a level of aggression through trying to fight for food, those sort of things, or shelter. Then some of these traumas can come through to this incarnation, and do come through. And so we start to get the feeling of I must have this, I must have that, because if I don't, I won't be able to survive. So it's almost like the survival mode from the previous incarnations. It becomes part of this incarnation. But irrespective of the level in which we are benefiting from being in society, maybe we're sort of middle class citizens where we've got a significant amount of disposable income, we've got good family life, good cars, good education, good houses, good friendships, living in a nice location, for example, are still affected by this feeling of not having enough in the previous incarnation. And that comes through a lot with people. And you can see that people who gather a lot of things around themselves would have been people who were fighting hard to survive, and may have been taking people's scraps in the previous incarnation, the things that they've discarded, for example, whether it's food or items of use, or damaged tools, for example, they've taken that just enable them to survive. And so anything that could potentially be used to create a level of income or a way in which they can feed themselves or clothe themselves or make shelters themselves would have been useful then. And that feeling stays with them. They could be like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or Warren Buffett or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There could be any of these, plus the countless other hundreds of world billionaires. They could have been in the same boat. But having the money doesn't count. It's the need to have more to satisfy this feeling of not having enough, because they haven't got enough to survive. And that's spurred them on in this incarnation, but it's unsatisfiable. And so the frustration that comes with it, which clutters the mind up, is that they have to have more and more to sustain this overwhelming feeling that they had in the previous incarnation to survive.
It could be such a sticky thing, Guy, because the way the world is now too, and the way marketing is, it's like it just feeds off of that itch that people want to scratch. So it's like it's so easy to then, if that underlying root is there of sort of dissatisfaction in needing something to sort of fill this insatiable sensation, there's umpteen million things that you can try to keep having access to, and ease of trying to bring these things in. So for the average person then that is wanting to start that process of uncluttering their life a little bit more, because the reality is you said it very clearly, when we start to clutter those things in, or we accumulate more things, we actually create more responsibilities for ourselves. And at a certain point, everybody just gets overwhelmed. Like, this is where I hear people like, I just can't keep doing it. And then you're trying this process of how do you start then this untethering so that you actually have more freedom in your life to then spend this time in things that are going to actually give you a deeper sense of fulfillment and meaning. So how do people that are in the middle of it right now and are kind of on this hamster wheel, where do they start the process of starting to practically declutter and change that around?
Go on holiday. Go on holiday in a materialistic way. Sorry, unless start again. Go on holiday in a very unmaterialistic way. Take a backpack with you, a small backpack with the clothes that you need, just the very basic clothes that you need to clothe yourself for 2 weeks. Do it. You just go on board the airplane with what's in a small bag. Do it on a regular basis, and that's all you need. Without giving too much away, you wash your underwear at night when you're in the shower, for example, so you don't need to have 3 or 4 pairs or 10 pairs. You see people going for 2 weeks, and you think, are they moving house? They've got 6 bags of stuff with them. They can't carry it, so they have to have people help them. You only need a small amount of stuff. Go on holiday for 2 weeks, taking a very small rucksack with your very basic things. It might be a phone and a charger. It might be a wallet with some cash in it, a couple of credit cards. It might be a few t-shirts or a coat, a waterproof coat, one jumper to keep you warm, maybe 1 pair of jeans extra to what you've got on you, and 2 or 3 pairs of socks, and including the ones you're wearing, and the same with your underwear. That's it. That's it. That's all you need. And
So
just
I'm
do
almost
it,
getting a
and
taste.
that will teach you how to live in a minimalistic way.
It makes me think of Guy, when we had moved to Mexico, we had actually gone there without knowing how long we would have to stay there. And we ended up staying there for just under a year, but we essentially left all of our belongings and just took a suitcase each of clothing and some books and other necessities in there. And realistically, when we were there, we realized we were pretty much choosing between 3 to 4 outfits out of the suitcase. So the suitcase was mainly shut and left to the corner of the room. And we just realized really how little we truly need. And that was really that's a great sound advice, because it felt like for us a really practical way of coming to terms with what is truly needed in order to live.
Well, and it actually feels like I mean, I can tap into that sensation of it. I remember
Mhm.
backpacking across Europe, 25 years ago with a backpack for about 4 months, and that was it. And I think part of the enjoyment, even when I reflect back on that, is because there was such little that I needed to actually manage. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff. It's like everything you had,
Mm.
you could pick up and go at the drop of a hat if you wanted, because you didn't have to actually spend so much time prepping for things. It reminds me of how my stepson, who's 19, shows up here whenever he
Yeah.
comes out for a month, and he's got like a little bag with a couple of things in it, and that's it.
I'm like, honey, you
That's
just
it,
come over with one underwear.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, the other thing is, I mean, is look at what you've got around you. You're not constantly having to do it, and think, well, I've got this stuff, right? Have I used it in the last 6 months? Maybe. Okay, hang on to it for a bit. Have I used it in last year? No. Right. Put it to one side. Have I used it in the last 2 years? No. Okay, get rid. The thing is that when we start to do that, we realize we've forgotten what we've got. And we do forget what we've got. We start to realize how much stuff we've got that we've forgotten we had. So if you've forgotten you've got it, or you don't use it in you know, you know regularly, and you haven't used it in a year or 2 years, then it's actually quite unnecessary for it to be in your possession in the first place. So again, what you should do, I know people will say, "Oh, go and sell it on eBay, or go and sell it on something else." I just personally, I just don't have the time to do that, and I just take it to a charity shop because, okay, I'm losing what I bought, and some people would say, "You've paid a lot of money for that. What, why are you just giving it away?" Well, maybe I bought it so somebody else could have it. That's a bit of a strange sort of logical way of thinking about it, but maybe the process was that I had to experience the purchase of something, and then that was it. That was it. That was a way of detaching from that particular thought process, and then a month or a few years later, maybe think, well, actually, I don't need that, and you just give it away. There was an interesting story that Paramahansa Yogananda gave in his book, The Autobiography of Yoga, and it's when his teacher's teacher, Lahiri Maharshi, was being awakened again by his teacher, Babaji. And he said that in your past life with me, you were distracted by wealth. You were attracted by wealth. And he said, was I? He says, yes, you were. Huh. Right. So we're going to expose you to opulence now to see how you respond, to see if I can reawaken you even further, because that was a blockage. So he manifested this huge, unbelievably opulent hotel in front of him, where everything was got jewels encrusted in it, marble, gold encrusted taps, and all this sort of stuff that would have attracted him in the previous incarnation. And he looked at it and said, "That's interesting. Did these actually turn the water on?" And he could see, and he could see that he wasn't attracted to it anymore. And Babaji sort of, did a little dance or something, or skipped around. Said, "Great, you've mastered it, right? Okay." And he just dissolved it. And he said, "Right, we can work on the rest of your reawakening now," because he moved beyond. He moved beyond this attraction to wealth from these previous incarnations, this incarnation. And so we should start to use these things. So, if we've got it and we haven't used it, okay, it might be a bit emotional sometimes if it's a family heirloom, for example. But if we don't need it, give it to another family member. Now, if it's difficult to lose it out of the family, give it to another family member who would appreciate it. But if you don't need it, is it making you any fitter? No. Is it making you any healthier? No. Is it making you feel better? No. Is it making you feel good about it or egotistical? No, because you've forgotten it's there. So all these different things are important to consider. That what we are is what we are now. Thinking that I'm better than the bloke down the road because I've got 3 cars and they're all Mercedes S classes. Not that I've got 3 cars that are Mercedes S classes, but if you start to think in that way, that's when they start to own you. And one of the things to notice that even if you do have a lot of stuff, if they own you, you must have them, and you must have them to present yourself to the wider population, then materialism has got a firm sort of fishing hook type grip on you, and you can't get out of it. But if you've got them and you don't need them, and they're still there, and they're gathering dust, you think, well, okay, charity shop time. That's it.
Yeah. Well, in those things, I feel like all of this stuff carries a certain energy with it too. And it does feel really freeing when we do declutter. I know probably once or twice a year we'll run through the house, and just even with the kids, it's like, okay, what's not being used? And it's like they go, and then again, we go and drop it off at the thrift shop or the local charity area. But even going through, I mean, we even did this because right now I feel like even like with pictures, I mean, people have thousands upon thousands of digital pictures that are stored that they probably never even look at again. And I still feel like there's something with that, just the accumulation of it. I feel like in some ways it still feels like it can siphon off bits of energy or something that maybe we're not aware of. I know when we've cleaned out literally hundreds and hundreds of old pictures, and you maybe keep like, from when the kids were little or something, you keep a couple key ones that really touch you, and then there's so many that you just don't need to have all, and you can't look at all of them. Because it used to be you'd keep your pictures in a photo album and you'd have, some key ones. Now it's like you can have literally tens of thousands of pictures that are sitting on a phone,
On a cloud.
on a cloud somewhere.
Yeah.
But I mean, does that stuff still hold an energy, even if we're not totally aware of it? And when we declutter, do we get some of that energy back to then put into other parts of our life?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically it's a way of us maintaining what we are in the physical. It's our history, isn't it? I mean, at some point we all leave. Everybody leaves this incarnation, but it's for some of us it's a good thing to do, is to leave something behind that historians can use or archaeologists can use as a way of understanding or gauging what life was like, a couple of hundred years ago, a couple of thousand years ago. So I, for one, will probably use my copy as a bit of a time capsule to show everything that I've got there to be digitized. You don't even know if the technology we've got will be available then. We might be back to chiseling characters out on a piece of slate or something in a few hundred years' time. We don't know. But the thing is, for me, it's good to have something that you can share with people later, that they can use as a reference point for what we are. But in terms of storing this stuff, and I've got loads of old photographs, Kodachrome or Fujifilm photographs that I need to sift through myself. And again, just pick out the basic ones, because at the time you just take a load and you think, well, that's good. And digital photography is worse. You like say you go somewhere and you come back, you got 170 photographs you've just taken. What happened there? And maybe they get stored on your phone and everything else, and they get downloaded onto a computer or put in the cloud somewhere, or another piece of storage media. But again, it's an association with being here. it's cluttering up the energy associated with what we are. Now, if we decide to sort of say, right, I'm storing that there, that's it, gone, then that's fine. If you're saying that's for a bit of history for somebody to sort through, you know, when I've left this incarnation, it might help somebody understand the, you know, how we were experiencing things, what cities look like, what people dress like, you know, what the countryside look like. You know, is it still there? No, etc., etc. Then it's a useful thought process to try and use it as a time capsule type of medium. But at the end of the day, even that is, you know, there's enough now on the internet to no longer need that. So although it's nice to keep pictures of Auntie Joan or, you know, or your father, those sorts of things, Uncle Sid, or those sorts of people, at the end of the day, they've been here to experience something, they've experienced it, and they've left. The fact that they've been here in people's minds and passed through and passed on as knowledge or as memories is good. But at some point that disappears. And if you look at, I mean, there's a rather interesting process we go through when we lose somebody. And that process is to basically, other than, you know, from a traceability perspective, you know, you close the bank accounts down, you register their death, you remove their tax numbers, you remove them from the National Health Service. You do lots of different things that sort of eradicates the fact they're ever on the planet, which gets a bit emotional at times. I've gone through it several times. And you think to yourself, well, if the general population and the processes we're in are designed to declutter the information about the population of the Earth, because they can't store information about people who are no longer here, then in essence, that frees up that system to deal with what's there now. So if you feed that back to us, if we can declutter ourselves to have to refer to what we've had or those we had around us, and therefore we can allow ourselves to focus on them now, then that makes our ability to focus on them now significantly more efficient, and therefore makes us more efficient in the way in which we think, behave, and act, and therefore how we evolve as well. So thinking about, you know, eradicating the fact that somebody ever existed when you lose them is actually a good thought process to adopt in terms of the stuff around you and the stuff they owned as well.
That's definitely a good practice for people at the moment. I think after listening to this episode, just do a bit of a reflection. Look back at your life, look at all the different things that are cluttering up, things that are maybe not essential, that you don't need, things that you haven't looked at for a long time. What can you start the process of decluttering, and then see what your energy feels like, because a lot of that stuff's all tied to the past too. So I feel like it's like this past energy that is always then a part of how we are moving forward. And I like the feeling that if we can clip ties with a lot of that stuff, how do we show up right now as who we are at this specific time space coordinate and move forward from there without the tethers of some of these other things that maybe we have associated ourselves with.
I mean, there's a number of times I've done like total clear outs, and you feel so free afterwards. It's like, wow. it is total freedom. And, you know, without doubt, owning something physical or something, you know, psychologically materialistic, in terms of a thought, behavior, and action, does create a link to it and a responsibility to it that stops us from focusing on what we are now, what we're supposed to be doing now as well. So it's important to simplify our lives as much as possible. And this is where renunciants come in. You know, renunciants achieve self-awareness or God awareness because they renounce the addictions of those behaviors and actions, the distractions of being in the physical. They put themselves somewhere but they're not affected by marketing or the need to have the latest this, that, or the other. And so they achieve enlightenment much faster than those who are constantly bombarded by all these different, you know, marketing regimes and media, and the need to have this, that, and the other, or the need to have a, you know, a new or a replacement car because they can't travel to work. You know, if they're sort of living in the grace of God, then they're detaching themselves, renouncing the physical world while still being in here, while still being here. Then they've achieved this freedom that is, for us, it looks like they're vagrants, but to them, they've achieved so much freedom that we can't possibly understand it. But sometimes when you declutter, when you move a house, you do understand it.
Mm-hmm. What's really interesting, Guy, on the last note, is I've observed my mom actually getting on a bus. So since my father passed away a few months ago, my mom oftentimes now gets on the bus from where we live. The funds aren't there for her to travel anywhere. And she just basically gets on a bus from this side of town, travels into different parts of town, and she's gone for hours. But as you're speaking, it seems to me that it's her way of just releasing the ties with all that she has and all that she's known and all that she's connected with, to have a taste of freedom through just getting away from all of it and going away with just her bare essentials, the clothes on her, for the day and coming back.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting program on television. I won't say what it was, but basically, there's one of the characters that was on the autistic spectrum, and had also got a quite a significant level of photographic memory. But the autistic spectrum part of him, his character, was illustrated by him living in a caravan, and he got just basically 3 sets of clothes. One was washing, one was being ready to be worn, one was being worn. He got 1 cup, 1 plate, yeah, 1 small plate for his bread, 1 knife, 1 fork, 1 spoon. That's it. Yeah, that's all. That's all he needed. 2 pairs of shoes, one that was being cleaned or clean, one that was wearing. That's all he had, and there was no need for anything else. And it was perfect. Perfect illustration of living in a minimalistic way, where you got what you needed. And why, when you're living on your own, do you need 6 plates? Do you need a set of 6 knives and forks? It just illustrated the nonsense about having too much to be able to exist. That's all you need. Again, it's the backpacking, isn't it? You've got one of everything, and that's it. That's all you need to move around. And so, transposing this to the thought process and embracing it and seeing the freedom it gives you, or feeling the freedom it gives you, is not only detaching ourselves from the materialistic world, but it's also opening the gate to the metaphysical world as well. Because when we start to detach from this, we start to become able to move into the next levels as well.
Beautiful. Guy, any final words for the audience around the theme of this series on living freely? Anything that you'd like to finish up with?
Yeah, so let me just meditate a moment on a meaningful sentence. Be in the moment. You only need what you're working with right now to be able to perform the deeds or the work that you do right now. Working that way with everything, so that you only have the bare essentials to allow you to do a job properly. In doing so, you'll significantly declutter your house or your workspace, and also you remove the responsibility for maintaining it or perpetuating its existence. And therefore, you'll give yourself time to become the real you and not what others expect you to be.
Thank you very much, Guy. I feel like it's such a gift to have this higher perspective of our world and our reality at this time, because on so many levels, when we look around us, we see things as chaotic, disorderly, falling apart. And it's almost as if seeing it through the metaphysical lens, we're able to see how all these pieces are actually falling into place or being allowed to fall into place in order to hold a deeper understanding of who we truly are and how we can navigate within our world, and therefore see all these challenges as real opportunities that come up.
Yeah, it's surprising how little you need. Again, it's the backpacking business, isn't it? You know, what do you need to go on holiday? I challenge the listeners and the viewers to go on holiday for 2 or 3 weeks with a small backpack full of clothes and very bare essentials. You know, a toothbrush and a comb and a tube of toothpaste and a single pair of shorts and socks. Yeah, and that's it, and a waterproof, and they can do it.
And then write it and share your experience with us. I'd like to hear that too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Guy, where
I've
can
managed it. I've managed it several times,
Yeah.
multiple times. Yeah, and
Honestly,
still do, and it's great.
when I think of some of my favorite times and my favorite experiences, they're usually tied back to those types of things. Even before Tay and I before we got married and had kids, we actually went away for a month and just backpacked and very basics. And we just kind of day to day figured out what we were doing and
where we were going to sleep even.
yeah, I mean, it was one of the most relaxing times I think we ever had, because it it gave you the flexibility to be able to be spontaneous. Sometimes when you get so many of these attachments, the spontaneity is not accessible because we've got too many responsibilities. But I found when we were able to do that, we could be really spontaneous and just in the moment
And free
move
and
free,
creative.
and that really felt freedom. So I think that's beautiful. Guy, where can people learn more about the work you're doing?
Well, they can visit my website, which is www.beyondthesource.org, and everything that I do is on there, including the books, the blogs that I do from the World Sat Sanger, the recordings of the World Sat Sanger, which are now on YouTube. They're storing it all rather than the website. And of course, there's all the different lectures that I've done. They can download the PDF files for the PowerPoints, and they can see the different workshops that I'm doing as well. There's plenty of people like Jason and Tara have interviewed me, and interviewed other people as well. It's important to get a good, broad brushstroke of information about the greater reality. So don't just listen to one person, listen to lots of different people and make your own mind up. That's the most important thing.
All of that information will be on the show notes, so people can check that as stuff out.
We'll include your YouTube link as well, because we also like to follow along on your monthly satsang as well.
Wonderful. Guy, thank you so much, and wonderful to chat with you again.
Thank you. It's an honor and a delight to work with you too as well. And you're doing a great job. And thank you for being of service in this way.
It's our pleasure. Thanks,
Thank
Guy.
you.